Or are you sharing your screen today? Whatever you want.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm going to try and share my screen because my goal today is to run through the entire sexual assault protocol. Is that? So let me know when.
Yes. This is Natalie Novotny Goals, and even though Jamie is going to just run through the sexual assault protocol, I think most of you have realized that both of the protocol tools have similar sections and they both are laid out and operate the same way. So even though we're just working with one of them, what Jamie shows you on here will allow you to maneuver through and manipulate the other one. Thank you.
Jamie, are you still there? I think Jamie may have exited by accident, so it'll just be a second here. There she is.
Jamie, could you also just briefly introduce yourself, just for those who may not have met you before?
Sure thing. Let me just, I'll do that first. So in case anyone doesn't know who I am, I'm Jamie Peasy. My role throughout the process was to synthesize what the whole statewide work group and all of our volunteers in the field suggested should be in these tools. We did our best to compile like all of the most recent and beneficial online resources in model templates to create the protocol development tools that you see here today. And they do a really good job of encapsulating all of the aims and requirements of the STOP grant. Members of the statewide work group and lots of different volunteers in the field collaborate to create and test these tools. So today's first check-in, we're just going to run through the sexual assault protocol guide. As Natalie mentioned, it's similar in design and layout to the domestic violence protocol guide, but we're not going to do both here today. What you learn in today's meeting is completely applicable to the domestic violence protocol guide. And I'm going to share my screen. And is that popping up? It should have, yes, our sexual assault. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, like I mentioned before, I'm just going to run through the entire document, and I have some pre-made answers that I'm going to pop in and talk about where the answers came from and how you can use this template with your existing template. So right here on our page number 2, our introduction guidelines for use. This is all your basic information about requirements and how to use the tool. Just like very simplified, this protocol guide acts as a plug and play template that includes all of the information required for your team to draft complete and well-researched coordinated community response protocols. Some of the basics is there's areas in brackets and highlighted in blue throughout the document to assist teams in filling out their own information. These blue sections contain drafting or discussion prompts, hyperlinks to applicable resources or statutes, and some sections even include sample language that you can adopt to your protocol guide verbatim. And all of the blue sections should ideally be deleted by the time you're done drafting your protocol. And there are a ton of sections that contain standardized information that is already completed and has been vetted by experts and members of the work group. We know that we have teams with varying levels of protocols already developed and in use. So if you already have one, information that is in this document and not in your document can just be copy and pasted into the relevant sections of your own. And the same goes in reverse. Feel free to plug existing information from your protocols into this guide if you prefer that. Basically, what we're getting at is protocols need to cover information in a consistent manner with what is presented in the tools, but that does not mean you need to adopt this exact template. All right, let's dig right in. So we have our table of contents right at the beginning. You can click on it and get to different places in the protocol guide. I'm not going to do that right now because it'll throw me off. And we can start with our basic components, section 1 and subsection A. And this is basically where you're going to put your team mission statement. The PCAR training videos that are linked right here are really helpful to explaining how to simply draft a mission statement and goals. I have a little bit of what is in that video down here, and these links to NSVRC resources and a few other resources are extremely helpful just to get a baseline for protocol development. These links have just about everything that you would need to develop a protocol from scratch, but here we've already given it to you in this template format. So if I was going to complete this section with my team, and we have reviewed the links, ideally watched the videos and talked about what is our mission statement. Maybe we already have a mission statement, we can just pop it in. I would, after I'm finished reviewing everything, delete the blue part. And I'm just going to add what my draft mission statement is. And I also have draft team goals. Again, this could be things that you already have developed and that you would just pop in so that everyone on the team is on the same page. Subsection B, just partners involved in the response. This is where you would write down everyone who is involved in your team. I already filled out a little bit here. Director or designee of the example sexual assault program, name, email, perhaps put a phone number, but I know most people are more prefer email these days. So ideally, this would all be filled out at the end. For our subsection 2 down here, this is suggested membership, and this is where you're asked to reflect with your team about who is missing in your coordinated community response. Our blue section here is just a direction section. That means there's not going to be anything for you to draft in the blue, just it's basically a discussion prompt. The example we used here is if you had a migrant farm worker population in your community, having the participation of an organization that has already earned the trust of that population would be extremely beneficial in connecting their clients with other Stop Teen organizations. So just take a second to think about what is lacking in your coordinated community response, if anything. And then once we've decided on that, again, you could delete the blue, and then I would add whatever you decide, if it's not already listed here, who you would like to have in your coordinated community response in the future. And next we get into guiding principles. And something that I'll also mention as we're going through this, because this is a Word document, which means it's super easy to edit, but formatting could get in the way, you're most likely going to have to go in after and make sure everything looks good after you've finished working on the guide, which is, kind of a never-ending process, but so be it with a Word document. All right, now we're in subsection C, and this is our guiding principles. So guiding principles are tenets of STOP that must be reflected throughout all parts of the protocol. This section simply asks teams to discuss and jot down a few examples with their team about what their team is already doing to uphold the aims of STOP. And these terms do get thrown out a lot: trauma-informed, survivor-centered. So it was important to the work group to have teams define how they uphold these principles. And you'll see there's a ton of different resources linked throughout. That's what our italicized, underlined guys right here show. and they can be used to help you drafting. You may want to copy what these organizations say verbatim after you've discussed it with your group, or they can act as a springboard for discussion. For today's demonstration, we're just going to go into the survivor-centered approach because I found that can be a little bit more difficult to define than trauma-informed. So again, I would click on the link. I don't think it's not gonna share my screen that way, but through that link, you can get connected with a bunch of other links. If you don't already have examples, which I highly doubt, of engaging in survivor-centered practice, there's tons of examples through these resources. And also Google is gonna be your best friend. I cannot tell you, even when preparing for today's presentation, how many more new, relevant, great stuff I found just by Googling survivor-centered practice in a SART. But for example, so assuming that my team has already gone through, talked about it, looked at the resource, decided what their examples are going to be. If you were a team that's perhaps a little bit more new and want to go with like a more general understanding of what this means, it can look a little something like this. And these are things that are already reflected in our protocols, but if you wanted to reiterate it here, or perhaps you already have concrete examples of what you're doing or plan to do, it may look a little more something like this. And I will make sure to send this draft that we're working on today to Tanya so she can disseminate it to you all as well. If I am copying something directly from the internet, I do like to always cite to where it came from. One, because we don't want to plagiarize, and two, because it's very useful to see this information in context with additional resources on the website, and just so we can know we're all on the same page. And then in this section, we also have victim safety and offender accountability and what coordinated community response means. For today's exercise, we're going to add in a response for the coordinated community response. Again, after my team and I have gone in and looked at what these resources are, discussed how we want to answer it, get rid of the blue, and decide on our agreed upon response. Down here, we do have a little section about managing team conflicts after talking with members of the work group. What happens when you have different members on your STOP team that may have conflicting opinions? It may be a good idea to come up with your own directions right here. A personal conflict protocol. I know you don't want extra work, but it's definitely something to at least be thinking about. And the PCAR training videos, this one right here, influence and intention, positively using power in STOP teams, is very relevant and useful for teams when it comes to the conflict section. But assuming my team has already discussed this, we watch the videos. Once it's done, I'll just get rid of it. And here we have our STOP certification guidelines and victim protection section. There's nothing additional for you all to fill out here. This has already been completely filled in, and it just has all of the information, the essential statutory protections for victims, and the requirements that STOP grantees must adhere to. So you have your prohibition against polygraphing, and we also have links to the federal statutes, as well as PCAR position statements, just additional resources that break down full-on legal statutes into a more digestible way to read them, which as a lawyer, even I prefer sometimes. Victim rights related to forensic evidence, and we also have tons of additional little resources in here depending on the needs and knowledge base of your team. All that stuff is in here. And there is going to be an upcoming presentation from Equitas regarding some of the more new STOP certification guidelines, such as evidence-based prosecution. And that's going to be coming up in the next couple months through one of these calls. Yeah, so just
That will be the November check-in.
oh, perfect.
They're going to go over all the STOP certifications and delve a little bit more into where they came from, why they're there, and how you need them.
Thank you. All right, and next we have our confidentiality section, and this is also substantially filled out already by our work group members who felt this information should be filled out in its entirety. And it's really good, helps explain confidentiality, legal privilege, all that stuff. Again, with links to the statutes, links to additional resources. We do ask that your team comes up with their own comprehensive confidentiality statement. Just has to be a short statement about your team is how they can and should manage sensitive information shared in meetings. There's another one of those PCAR training videos that is also extremely useful when talking about this. I did some research on NSVRC. I came up with one that looks.
Jamie,
Sure.
am I able to ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you want to wait to the end or not, but I'm sorry I was a couple minutes late, but I do have a question. What you're going down through is a sexual assault protocol.
Yes.
And everything in here, like not everything, but most is in our protocol from the county we're in. Do we have to have all of these things in our protocol that you're walking through?
If this information is not already included in your protocol and doesn't have to look the same, you should go ahead and put it into your protocol so you can make sure all the bases are checked.
So outside agency collaboration, conflict resolution within the STOP team, if we're fighting with each other, we should put all that in there.
Yeah, and you just have to include the stuff that's in this existing protocol. It's a great idea to have another protocol for when a conflict does arise, but it's not a requirement. It's just a suggestion to make your lives easier.
So some of this stuff is suggestions and some of this stuff we have to have in it.
Yes.
And how do we differentiate between the two? Does it say that?
Well, for example, when we're talking about the conflict, it's just, I had deleted it. Okay.
I lost you, Jamie.
Yeah, it does not say you must do this. The information that is presented looking like a protocol outlined, it should be pretty similar to what you have in your own protocol. But there is extra stuff thrown in throughout, resources just for you to look at, but especially stuff that is already written in, as well as blue sections where things should be filled out. You should have similar information in your protocols.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries. All right, so back to the team confidentiality statement. For an example, and you can see when I pop it in, it makes everything look a little screwed up. So when it just comes back to messing around with formatting, which can be pretty annoying sometimes when it doesn't work. There we go. You should get lucky with the formatting working out correctly as this document is intended, but you may have to play with it. All right, and then we also have all of the selected reporting regulations already filled in for you with links. Section 2, this is our background information and special considerations. We have our sexual assault basics, definitions, and Pennsylvania law contains several crimes that fall under the umbrella of sexual assault. And we have some of them included here already with links. The appendix 1, which is your statute document, already has all of these crimes written out fully. And you could just take those and put them here. We just want access to the crimes that constitute sexual assault in Pennsylvania. So if you don't feel like clicking through the links and going on the online repositories for the statutes, it's already in Appendix 1. We also have our legal protections where we would like you to include relevant portions of the Pennsylvania Crime Victims Act, and there's a link to that as well. I used OVA's website page about this to come up with just something simple like this. And this is not copied directly from the website, but boiled down to be a little bit easier to digest. Same with protection from sexual violence and intimidation orders. Just quick, who qualifies, what is the main gist of it? And again, this information is already included in the appendices as well. Also, you can add information about what offices serve the protection orders in your jurisdiction, what happens if there's a conflict, what are the known cutoff times or stop times for getting a protection order, because we know those vary greatly by jurisdiction and by court. We've also included a protection order chart in Appendix 2, which could be helpful for explaining things to a client. Sexual assault victimization, and this is how does your team define sexual assault victimization, since there's a wide array of activity that can constitute sexual assault as well as domestic violence. We wanted to make sure that that is fully encapsulated into the protocol as well. After reviewing this information with your team, you could opt to adopt the sample language here. Of course, the goal is to read through this and look through the resources and know what's out there before just doing what I just did. This is assuming it's already been covered by your team. But this definition has a lot of the different aspects of sexual assault, including there's no stereotypical perpetrator, offenders come from all backgrounds, a little bit about power imbalance, just a good definition right there.
So what if it's a different definition? It's kind of the same, but it's a little different. We don't need to use that language, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, just an example. Confronting bias, and this is where we're going to talk about how does your jurisdiction treat victims and survivors of sexual violence. Have you had any specific issues to deal with? Address this specifically. We have some example language in here too, but this is something that's going to be very specific to where you are practicing. And again, we have some Equitas resources to learn more. On the ground efforts, and that's going to be what are the specific programs, safeguards, etc. that are happening in your jurisdiction. If you have case statistics, which I know can be a little bit more difficult to get for sexual assault crimes versus how many protection orders are happening in your jurisdiction. What would you like to see or plan for your jurisdiction to enhance its response to sexual assault? Just a basic what is going on in the ground where you are. We also have our strangulation section here, which is pretty substantially filled out, as you can see. We have an additional webinar about the intersection of strangulation and sexual violence. We would like you to take a look at Pennsylvania's strangulation law, linked here. Talk about affirmative defenses, and when those defenses can be considered after I've gone and reviewed that with my team. Now, this is just taken directly from the internet. The crime right here covers our affirmative defenses. We'd probably want to talk a little bit more about when the affirmative offenses come into play, but that's your basics right there. Signs and symptoms. Again, we do have some example right here, but you can find all the information you need to fill this out right through this link on PCAR's website. The team should talk and research about how victims talk about strangulation themselves. And that's the end of that section. And again, a lot of this information is linked already through here. Okay, next we have our special consideration section, and this is kind of where intersectionality is really highlighted, and we'd like you all to jot down a few sentences that are relevant to working with survivors from diverse backgrounds. What is important for your team to know about these considerations? What should they know when they come up? And most importantly, are there any specialized organizations, agencies, or specific persons in your network that you could connect a survivor with to? Oh, excuse me, connect a survivor to for these specific considerations. In researching for today, I found that South Carolina's model STOP protocol has a really great section just like this that I will make sure that you get all that. It is not linked in this protocol because I just discovered it the other day, but we will make sure you have access to that, and it does a lot of the same things that we're trying to accomplish here. And we did include a more detailed supplemental basic human trafficking protocol guide, as my background is in serving human trafficking survivors. And again, it's just optional, supplemental, if you don't already have a protocol for dealing with human trafficking, which is gonna straddle a bunch of different crimes and a bunch of different situations. We have that available for you too if you'd like. But again, just basic information about human trafficking in your jurisdiction and what specific agencies, is there a specific person, who would you call, or who would you want to refer a client to? And for purposes of today's exercise, I was going to fill in information about male victim and survivor considerations. Using these two resources through RAINN and NSVRC. I came up with something like this. And again, my answers do not have to represent what how your team wants to answer this. We just ask that you take these different demographics into consideration in your protocols.
Excuse me, Jamie, could I just say something really quick?
Sure.
This is Natalie. We realize too that every county in Pennsylvania is different. Part of this is, STOP teams, your community better than we do. If you don't have a particular population that we have outlined in here, we're not going to force you to go through a meaningless exercise of writing something up about how you would respond to them. So you need to do, what makes sense to you. But of course, we realize everybody has male victims. Some of these are universal, but we also know that some of these would be more likely to be found in different areas of the Commonwealth. That's all.
Thanks, Natalie. Yes, there are some of these certain demographic sections that may not be applicable to you whatsoever. But I also filled out a draft answer for consideration for victims and survivors of color. And again, all of these different considerations were added by members of the work group that they thought would be important to have in the protocol guides. So again, and this is just after.
Jamie?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but we got a good question in the chat. Would we also have a section focused on PREA considerations as well? And I
Yes.
think that could be, because we do have a number of counties that have correctional facilities in their jurisdictions. So yes, you could have a section in there focused on PREA.
Yes, and actually that's such great timing because number 8 is considerations for incarcerated victims and survivors, and it does touch on PREA, and that is where that would likely go in your protocol. Yeah, and as you can see, although I'd say most of Pennsylvania is pretty rural, not every place is. So these ones in blue, if I am in Philadelphia County and there's nothing rural there, this is not probably super relevant to me. And if I don't have any sort of college campus in my jurisdiction, also may not be relevant to me. All right. And finally, we come to our last section, and that is roles in the coordinated community response. And now this is going to be the most stakeholder specific section of the protocol, and it probably will require some solo work from members of the team. And we encourage each member of the team to complete their own respective section and to work through any missing parts together. We know that not all jurisdictions operate identically, and irrelevant information, as always, can be changed or deleted. Again, like this is a document for you. You have the general understanding of what should be in the STOP protocol, but again, this is for you and for your customization. So with these roles, I would start out by watching the collaboration for STOP Teams PCAR training video, making the most of meetings and retention and engagement. And those directions are pretty much what I just read to you here. So after I've gone and done that, I would delete it. And you'll see that each section has a lot of consistent information. We have our role, what their role is in the coordinated community response, our essential elements of trauma-informed and victim-centered practice. Those are just 2 to 3 best practice examples. I will provide those later on for the district attorney section, and their responsibilities. And these are all pretty consistent throughout. Depending on the role, however, though, there could be additional aspects that should be covered. Law enforcement, for example, is a section that does have additional protocol considerations, as you will see, specifically for initiating arrests in sexual assault cases and trauma-informed evidence-based investigation. Not knowing what your existing protocol looks like or what these procedures are already, we added those as appendices, and those were sent to you as well. So again, you don't have to adopt that exact protocol, but there does need to be something in your protocol addressing law enforcement and arrest in these cases, as well as evidence-based investigation. The healthcare professionals section is similarly has some extra stuff because of the role of SANE nurses. So you can see there is some additional information there about SANEs, but we go back to the responsibilities and they follow generally the same pattern, albeit with some differences, mandated reporting, informed consent, but we do have a lot of this sample information already filled out by people in the field or other members of the work group, that if it works with your protocol, if you want to adopt it, that's perfectly fine. Yes, so I will say that the healthcare professionals in the law enforcement section of the roles is definitely the most dense. Community-based advocates follows the same information. Systems-based advocates. if you have a child advocacy center as part of your coordinated community response. And again, if you don't have these partners, you'd feel free to get rid of these portions of the protocol guide. This guide is definitely more detailed than necessary intentionally so that you have all the tools at your disposal. And I was going to run through the prosecution section. So role, I'm going to adopt the role that was already filled out for us by someone in the field. And the roles section is really important so that all members of the team are able to basically explain and know exactly what everyone else's roles are in order for the team to work in the most effective way possible. So that's the intention with this portion. And then we also have our essential elements of trauma-informed and victim-centered practice. You know, just asking ourselves, what specifically do we do in our roles to incorporate trauma-informed and victim-centered practice? And ask for 2 to 4 examples. And they could be as general or as specific as you'd like them to be. Just whatever works for your group. And then with the responsibilities, this is, oh, Lizette, do you have a question?
I do, and I apologize for going backwards, but I've been processing in my head about the SART and the SANE activity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently rebuilding that response for both SART and DART with my local hospitals because of the challenges from the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Would I need to put that in the protocol because it's a moving target at this point in time, and it's going to take a fearsome long time to get clinical compliance from the 3 hospital systems, or can I reference it because it is a work in progress for us and take this information to direct that process with the hospitals? Because I find the information would be, well, I don't want to say more directive, but it would at least give people who are unfamiliar with this concept some teeth and some meat on the plate for them to chew on. But I know for us, I have 3 hospital providers and all 3 of them are no longer locally governed, and I'm dealing with all new people, all new process, and everything refers back to whoever the parent organization is.
You have a lot on your plate, like.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Well,
So we find, Jamie, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, so do you want to answer first and then?
Yeah, and then you just jump in, or if
Okay.
I misspeak, you just don't be afraid to correct me. But I put my camera on so you all can see me. But we run into this quite a lot. Just the number of hospitals that have consolidated, closed, or been bought out.
Yeah.
It's constantly happening, and you got that along with the just constant shortage of nurses. So we acknowledge that it is really hard to maintain a SART, and we know of a couple of counties that are in the process of rebuilding their SARTs. I think what you suggested, Lizette, is that for this particular time and getting this done, I think you can reference that this is a work in progress. But I think the idea of taking what we have in this protocol that's outlined as minimum requirements and sharing it with the hospital personnel probably would be very helpful, because I find that I have observed in a number of communities that there's a really strong SART, but that really happens because there's someone at the hospital who is a huge champion of it.
Right.
They either retire or they leave and things fall apart. So, yeah, if this helps you, please, by all means, use it.
Thank you.
Did I
'Cause
answer your question, or is there
you
more to it?
absolutely did, because I thought I was going to have a stroke there for a minute, you know, because I was like, I've been working for a year on this now, and I'm still very early days with, well, two of the systems are coming along fine. One of them is going to be my, lost step,
Mhm.
redheaded stepchild forever, I think. But you're right. The pandemic really knocked the stuffing out of our hospitals. I mean, there's been wholesale transition, and I'm going to sound ageist here, but I got 30-year-olds who were in head nursing positions who not only never heard of SART, never heard of our agency. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like in one hospital, I was like, we've only been working with this department since 1976. Where's the transition?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
and I actually do count that to the more global purchase of the hospitals, where we're having protocols and people being imported from other parts of the country who don't actually know the neighborhood, let alone the hospital's history with working with anybody. So,
Okay.
and are we going to get copies of this to play with? Not just a
Yes.
PDF, but
Yes. Right,
Thank you.
Jamie?
Yes,
Yeah.
I think you should have already gotten
Yeah.
a Word document version of this, but we can also send you this version that I've been playing with today, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Because there are a few things that I added. So yeah, and I'm also thinking,
Always a work in progress.
yeah, and again, like this is kind of what these documents are. These are the things that should be in your protocol, but we understand that the nature of this work is very much in flux sometimes, and you're dealing with a lot of turnover. And we also hope that taking the work and putting some of this institutional knowledge in the document will kind of help with that in the future, ideally.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. And I was going to say, I would probably put additional information about the situation right here in the additional community specific considerations. That's just a section that is pretty much throughout the protocol, just for you to add specific information about what's going on in your jurisdiction.
Well, historically, we have been asked to update our protocols usually once every couple of years anyway. So it could almost be updating the historical context of the relationship too, so that when people come and go, there's some kind of paper trail behind where things were at.
Yes, exactly. Okay, I'm going to take us back to the district attorney section here real quick. And again, just so you can see the different types of responsibilities, victim safety, confidentiality. This is something for district attorneys, statute of limitations specifically. We have to have something about evidence-based prosecution, which goes hand in hand with a procedure if the victim does not want to participate. And if I wanted to adopt what one of our stakeholders in the field had already drafted, just do so by getting rid of the blue and the italics. One section I did want to, that is in all of our different roles, is a section for collaboration and referrals. And this is where you can talk about the relationship between that role and the other members of the team. How can it be improved? Bless someone.
Sorry.
No worries. And also, how are referrals made? Information about MAUs between different agencies. Is there a specific point person for facilitating referrals? And also a little bit about how confidentiality is maintained when making referrals. We have one more section for the court, and it follows the same pattern. In the domestic violence protocol, also has a similar pattern. Probation and parole. And then if you have an additional representative that is not encapsulated in this template, this is where you would go in and add them here. And then finally, just all of our appendices laid out. I could go through those if you think it would be beneficial. But anything you hear, anything here that says supplemental, it means it's just, if you want to use it, you can. But again, you have to be mentioning human trafficking in your protocol, and you also have to be mentioning law enforcement, trauma-informed, evidence-based investigations, and initiating arrests. And that is all I have for today. If anyone would like to go back through a section or have any more questions, I'd be glad to cover that now.
The DA section, is that also supported by the District Attorneys Association in case we get pushback from our DAs who think they're demigods in our community?
Yes, Greg Rowe was responsible for helping edit that section. And he also had some other district attorneys look at it and go through it as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So also the District Attorneys Association, they'll be sponsoring a training, I believe it's in November, but it's a 2.5-day training that's designed to help counties meet the evidence-based prosecution certification. That's really going to be the focus of that particular training, and it's really geared towards STOP prosecutors and prosecutors in STOP-funded counties. So I know that it's listed on PDAI's website, so check it out, because that's something that they actually have been working on putting together for the last 2 years in anticipation of the new certification requirement in the reauthorization of VAWA. And also, you know, if you've been spending some time looking at these and you have questions about specific parts of it, or questions about anything really related to this, I mean, feel free to ask it. And we hope, as we have more of these web-based check-in opportunities, that you guys will feel comfortable taking part in them as you work through this process over the next 18 months. We're going to be having them about every 2 months. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring in like someone to give a training on a particular aspect of the protocol, a topic. So for instance, we're having someone from they're called Also, they're out of Chicago, but they actually work with OVW in providing technical assistance on STOP grant funds. And we're going to have somebody who, like I said before, in November, who's going to go through all of the certifications and how you meet them, and if you have any questions about them. And we'll also, as we have these check-ins, we'll have members of the original statewide work group on hand, who, if you have particular issues and if you're running into particular things in your county that you have questions about and how to put them into action, you can bring those questions to there and help, you know, they're available to help talk through things. And then I see Mike, who also works on PCCD staff. We've established a resource account, which he put in the chat. So you don't have to wait for one of these web-based check-ins. You have a question, just email it to us, and we'll work on it in between and get the answer back to you. And we'll also keep a running list of the questions that people send to us. And then when we answer them, we'll keep them out and keep a kind of a running list of all the questions and answers so everybody has access to them. Thanks, I'm done.
So is the next link going to be sent for the September meeting? Like, I'm looking at this protocol guide implementation with months and the year for 2023. Is there going to be like a link sent for each meeting? Do we have dates for all the meetings?
Yeah, when it's a live virtual check-in like the one today, we'll
Yeah.
send you a link to a Teams meeting.
Mhm.
But some of those are just what we're calling like an email blast, which is just like a PDF newsletter that includes some basic information on a specific topic. Typically,
Gotcha.
the live check-ins are going to be not every, but they'll be the third Thursday of that month. So that's the typical schedule, but I think the one with Equitas is not. I think it's on the second Thursday because of their scheduling issues. But I'm going to send those out probably this week, so you have a placeholder for the ones that are live.
So what we've been trying to do is work through whoever is listed as the project director in eGrants at PCCD. But one of our concerns is that perhaps we know how busy people are, and perhaps the project directors are not able to filter this out to all the rest of the members of the team. So if you would like us to put you on the distribution list every time we send meeting invites out for the stop email blast bulletins that we're doing, etc., let us know. You could send your email to that resource account and we'll add you to our email list, etc. Also, I know that some of you are signed up to attend. We're having a 2-day meeting here in Harrisburg where we're 4 stop teams where we're providing a range of presentations that complement some of the things that are in the protocols. Basically, if you're from a stop kind of funded county, your position doesn't have to be funded by the stop grant, but like if you're a member of a stop team or you're a staff person that's working on the project, but maybe you're only a little bit funded, etc., you're eligible to attend. We have a limited number of hotel rooms for folks who have to travel more than 50 miles one way to get here. And those hotel rooms will be covered by a grant, and we also will reimburse for mileage and subsistence. So if you haven't heard about that and you're interested in it, let us know in the chat and we can send you some information. It's going to be September 18th and 19th here in Harrisburg.
Is it possible for the members of the work team that are like providing oversight for this protocol development, because they do represent the different sectors, could they also send out redundant messaging in their broadcast listing to like DAs, judges, whatever? Because sometimes with stop teams, especially if they're led by the victim service agency, it may not, the value of their participation and the value of them taking seriously, like the training in November for DAs and stuff, it might resonate more strongly if it came from their own tribe as opposed to those of us in a different system.
You can do whatever you want, whoever you want added to the distribution list, give us their contact information and we'll add them.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Denise, go ahead. Denise, I saw you raise your hand, but if that was an accident, that's okay.
I just wanted to unmute. Sorry.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
This is the question I asked you about last time, or when I emailed you, Tanya. So we are wondering, yes, you told me to ask.
Sure, go right ahead. Yeah, I'm like trying to remember.
That's okay. We are having a debate because we're going through these and we're trying to separate our children's protocols from our adult protocols because of the university. And we're having a problem with what constitutes who can approve 14 to 18-year-olds getting a START exam, because the hospital says they're under 18, it's medical, they need a parent to approve it. Center Safe is saying they're 14, they can approve it. And the hospital is very adamant that they don't want to get sued. So that's what we're, what is everybody else, how is everybody else dealing with this between the new,
Yeah.
Well, that's what these calls are for, and I'm really glad that you brought that up, because that's the kind of stuff we can't anticipate every question. One of the things that we can do is we have access to folks at PCAR. We also have access to folks at the Department of Health, et cetera. And, we can try to get you answers or further information. But I would like to open it up to other counties. Does anybody want to offer any guidance or talk about your experiences in your county if you've had to work through a similar issue?
I can add that I wish Danny was here, but I don't think Danny was able to make it today. But I had spoken to actually Jamie and Danny about this, who are both attorneys.
Right.
And there's unfortunately, or well, either way, it's a difficult question, and it's something that both coalitions say that they hear a lot from their agencies. So both PCAR and PCADV, get these questions all the time. And there's no, so from my understanding from Danny, there's no specific law that covers this. There's a bunch of different laws that the hospital may interpret one way, and then the Victim Service Agency may interpret another way. There's like a Mental Health Procedure Act. The PFA Act talks about it, but also VAWA talks about it, and VAWA's the grant we're talking about today. And the VAWA says that if the recipient is a minor, then the consent to release must be signed by both the minor and the non-abusive parent or guardian. However, where the service recipient may consent for services without a parent, or there are circumstances, where a child can consent without the parent. In Pennsylvania, though, there's no state law that prohibits a minor from seeking domestic violence services without consent. Therefore, because a minor in PA may receive services without parental consent, the minor may release or prohibit the release of confidential information without parental consent. So, and maybe Jamie has something to say, but a lot of times this is one of the functions of a medical advocate is to provide that systems advocacy between your local hospital and the centers, because like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of changes with hospital systems in Pennsylvania with them being bought up by larger systems. So I know that a lot of teams have done a lot of advocacy with their local hospital to come up with a solution that everybody can agree on, and also working with their child advocacy services or child advocacy center. So there's not really a straightforward answer, I don't think. So it's really difficult. I'm sorry, I can't give you a straight answer, but
No, that's the problem, that we were
yeah.
sitting in meetings for hours going through, pulling out different laws that
Right, there's like
basically
4 or
contradict.
5. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that basically contradict each other, which is why we were
Mm.
like, okay, we need to, I mean, the hospital's making the goal, they're going to CHOP in Philly and they're conversing with CHOP, and we've got our child
Yeah, okay.
advocacy center on it. So we are looking at it from our end too, but we wanted to see, is there something from the state, or is this something that we need to say, hey, we need to have a firm law that says this is what it matters to, and something that we need to go advocate for on the other end of that. To make it, because
Yeah,
that aren't clear are the ones that get abused the most.
right. And different hospitals may have different policies when it comes to the children receiving services. So I'm not sure.
Hey,
But
Tanya.
something we can work on.
Tanya,
Yeah.
Chrissy Fortin, who's from Erie, and they
Mhm.
are in the process of reinvigorating their SART. Chrissy had her hand up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Chrissy, go
so
ahead.
as you guys are discussing here, I quickly texted Karen Wickwire over at UPMC Hammett. We work very, very closely with her and the folks on her program. This is literally what she says. Kids 13 and older can consent to their own care for pregnancy testing, sexually transmitted diseases, and sexual assault care. They would work with the child, though. If they had to do reporting, they would obviously work with the child to let them know that it would be better to get in touch with the guardian. But as far as pregnancy testing, STD testing, and sexual assault care, 13 and older can consent to their own treatment. And I'm assuming that would be a UPMC policy in general, because Hammett's within that.
Right, and that sounds like it's coming from a certain law that they're referencing and interpreting.
Yeah, Tanya, I sent,
yeah.
that's the law that I had found when you asked me this
Yes.
question. Yeah, because it doesn't hit on all of what we're getting at.
Right.
That was what I found to be most useful, and I can't find the email now, but
I think I can
sent,
find it.
yeah, that's the one that I was gonna mention.
Yeah, it's
She
like
did
some
continue to say that if there was anything else they needed, for example, from an injury, if they had to be sedated, something like that, they could not consent to that unless it was emergent.
Mm.
And that's where our hospital says that nothing is emergent in that regard. So. Thank you so much for getting that information, Chrissy.
Sure.
Yeah, and if Denise and Chrissy, you guys want to connect, if that would be helpful, we can.
I'll add my email to the chat.
Yeah, feel free. And we can also circle back with all the attorneys involved too and get their take on it. I'm trying to find your email too, Jamie, but I think it was the mental health protections law or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there may have been a law component too.
Yeah, which makes it very tricky, but I can send it out to Denise and Chrissy also, if that would be helpful. It probably would be. So anything else? Chrissy, did you just have your hand up by accident again? Or, I mean, not again, but it's still up, I think.
Oh yeah, I don't know how to take that down.
That's okay. You don't have to. You don't have to. Okay, well, if there's nothing else and Natalie and Jamie don't have anything else to add, we can end the webinar, and we'll put the recording up on our YouTube page as soon as it's approved, which shouldn't be too long, and I'll send it out along with some of the other stuff we talked about today.
Okay, before we go, we have a question from Sharon. When does the final protocol guideline need to be completed and adopted? January 1st, 2025. And we deliberately did not give anybody a timeline or anything, because we know that everyone who has had STOP, some of the counties representative had STOP for almost 2 decades. It's always been a requirement to have a protocol. And I think that everybody to some degree has protocols. There's some sections of this that some counties are just going to fly through because you've got it. But then there's other sections that you're going to have to spend a little bit more time on. So, just as long as you have a pretty comprehensive draft that you're ready to approve by the end of 2024, not 2023, 2024. And like I said, we are here and we're going to be offering plenty of technical assistance and things because we want you to succeed.
Is this just the sexual assault protocol, or is this all protocols, like a domestic violence protocol?
The DV and the sexual assault.
It's both of those.
It is. And
It's two.
Eric, they have very similar components. So the chances are if you have it done for one, you can just plug it in the other. Where they're going to differ is probably in section 3, where people have to outline their responses. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep. So it's 2 separate protocols that by the start of 2025.
Yes. And theoretically, no one really should be starting from scratch. Everyone has good stuff. It's just that we're looking for consistency, and also it's been close to 30 years since we started STOP, and the world has changed. So, like I said, this is to help bring everybody up to speed, give everybody a level of consistency.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone for their time and taking time to be here and to be present, and for the thoughtful questions that you've put in through chat or verbally. I also want to thank Jamie for taking the time to run through one of the protocol guides and kind of show you how they work. In the meantime, if you have questions or if you have other issues, please use the resource account. And if you want to be placed on the mailing list for any of the things we send out in regard to the protocols, just let us know in the chat or send us an email in the resource account and ask us to add you, and we would be glad to do that. If there aren't any more questions, I don't want to keep people unnecessarily, because I know how busy all of you are and the good work that you do. So thank you. Okay, then. Have a good day, everyone. Goodbye.